Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm a former educator, teacher, administrator. Whenever I say that, I'm always amazed at the level of engagement we get there. So anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining us today. And for those of you who are watching us online in the comfort of your own office or at home, welcome to you as well. My name is Jacqueline Ollison, and I work in the Office of the State Superintendent with Chief Deputy Glenn Price and our amazing Superintendent, Tom Torlakson.
And I am Irene Garcia, and I work in the Superintendent's Initiatives Office, and we're very happy to have all of you here with us today.
We are so proud of California and all of the support we have seen for our immigrant students. Just this past week, California legislature passed SB 54.
And it's sitting in the governor's seat right now, but it establishes California as a sanctuary state. We acknowledge that it takes more than legislative efforts. It takes all of us, and that's the reason why we're here today.
And our superintendent, Tom Torlakson, has been an amazing champion for all students, condemning racist hate speech and acts. And in his 7 years as superintendent, Tom Torlakson has also been a strong and effective champion for all of California's students' educational rights.
Calling for the creation of the safe havens for all students, and especially for those we're here to talk about today, our immigrant students.
We just want to take a few moments to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being live streamed and will be archived on YouTube. We will share the link with you once we have it.
And the restrooms are right outside the State Boardroom to the left.
And immediately following today's panel discussion, we will have breakout sessions beginning at 10:45 a.m., which you can locate in your program. And then another session will begin in this room at 11:30. So we are going to ask everyone to adjourn to the lobby at 10:30 a.m. And thank you in advance for your support and understanding about that. Plus, you can enjoy some of the great refreshments and coffee that's out in the lobby.
And you can find a program on your seat. On there, you can follow along. There is an agenda. And we have the bios of our panelists. We also have the focus questions, which the panelists will be using and addressing. And there's also an index card. On there, you can write any questions you have at any point and just kind of wave. And our volunteers are more than happy to pick those up. And then we will have the panelists respond to those. And we also would like for you to follow us on social media. So on Twitter, it's at CA Department of Ed, and on Facebook, it's CA Education. So follow us on social media.
Okay, so for today, we're going to be using Poll Everywhere today to interact and receive feedback from you. So we're going to try it out, right? If you have your cell phone, go ahead and take your cell phone out, and you can take a look at the slide there while we're doing this. What I'm going to ask you to do is to text the word Chief Deputy, and that's one word. It can be lowercase, to 37607. So once again, you're going to text the word Chief Deputy to 37607. I'm doing it with you. If you've done it correctly, it should say you've joined Jacqueline Ollison's session. Okay. In a moment, I'm going to activate the live poll, but I just want to take a moment to kind of ground us here in this room and to really reflect on why we are here today. We're going back to school as administrators, teachers, educators. We're making sure that we're creating the atmosphere and the environment so that all of our students feel safe, welcome, cared for, so that they can succeed academically. And when we think about that, we want to know, what does beyond safe havens mean to you? Okay, so thinking about that question, I'm getting ready to activate it right now. I want you to go ahead and respond. And when you respond, you can respond with words, you can respond with emojis, and we'll see what you put. So just 1 second. Oh, that's great. I'm starting to see some responses here. Safe for all kids. What else does beyond safe havens mean to you? safe places to learn, pushing back against unreasonable federal government action, community. All these responses are fantastic. And that's great. We know that it's working. Okay, so continue. So as we continue with this, we do have a second question for you today. Okay, you can continue to respond. Oh, I see some emojis. Love that. Here is my next question for you. What are you looking forward to learning today? I think that's a happy dance. Not sure. Taking care of everyone, dignity. That's so great. Wow, these are fantastic. And you can continue to share your responses. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to my colleague, Irene.
And today, I have the honor of introducing our State Superintendent of Public Instruction and my boss, Tom Torlakson. He recognizes and values the diverse experiences that our California students bring, including their and their parents' immigration status. And in light of the growing anxiety around immigration rhetoric, fueled by the 2016 election and federal actions, State Superintendent Torlakson launched a statewide Safe Haven initiative. And this initiative encourages school districts to pass resolutions to protect students' personal information and to keep them safe. To date, more than 116 school districts have passed this resolution, and they vow to protect nearly 2.6 million students. So please join me in welcoming State Superintendent Tom Torlakson.
Thank you, Irene and Jacqueline. Didn't they do a good job getting us started? Appreciate that. Good morning and welcome to the California Department of Education. We have a great team here and we're linked to you, to the community, the broader community, and certainly to all of our schools as we wish our students well and their parents well as we start the new year, this new school year. And we asked another question, why are we here? We're here because we care about the future of all of our children. In that regard, before we get started, I'd like to have us take a moment of silence because we care about the victims and the families that have been affected by the tragedies in Mexico and Puerto Rico and Texas and Florida, the victims of the earthquakes and the hurricanes. So just taking a moment of silence in each on our own way. Thank you. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of the families in these areas that have received these tragedies. And if you'd like to help in any way, I know many of you already have, is to link into the Red Cross, the Mexican Red Cross, and UNICEF of Mexico websites where help can be channeled to the victims and their families. And we thank those who are doing the heroic effort of helping children in a school that collapsed, helping them get out alive and dealing with the tragedy of those who didn't make it. So I want to say thank you because it's a strong team, un equipo fuerte that we have here today. We have an incredible panel here to share ideas, to give us some thoughts of how we can act and get more done on behalf of all of our children and their success. And so I'm so pleased that we have, besides the two of you met, Irene and Jacqueline, we have Nancy Zarenda and Jasmine Ortega, who are here as part of my team in CDE, and I want to thank them for their work, and Brianna Mullen. And thank all of you. I'm so glad to see Jorge Aguilar here, Sac City, and Jessie, who was the instigator of the idea for Safe Haven Schools resolutions, and they'll be telling us more about that as we go on. I'm glad to see David Lowe here, a great labor leader in California, the California CSEA, California School Employees Association. David, thank you for what you and your members are doing and what labor in general is doing to join arms, link arms on these issues. I want to thank Feliza Ortiz-Licon, who is here for advocating for our immigrant communities, not just here in California, but at a national level. She's a champion, aspiring role model to all of our students, and she's also a member of the State Board of Education. So she's used to sitting in this room in about that same spot for long hearings that sometimes last 4 hours, 5 hours. So it's a great team assembled here, and we're linked arms with a broader community, with the faith community, with community nonprofits, with those that are fighting for justice and for civil rights across California. In these troubled times, however, we unfortunately continue to hear reports about the anxiety, the growing anxiety and fear among our students and parents about the new immigration policies, the new bans on travel, and possible weakening of federal protections against discrimination. Some of our students and their relatives have already suffered serious harm from the new federal immigration policies and the end of the Deferred Action Childhood Arrivals, the DACA. This was a terrible act by President Trump. And that's why this conference is called Beyond Safe Havens. We want to hear from educators and leaders here today and linked into us on the web. How can we help protect all of our students? What further steps do we need to take? We welcome back all students to school, again, recognizing their potential, their joy, their hopes for the future and their parents' hopes for their future. We also know that school climate is critical to student success. The students have to feel safe, and the school climate has to be positive for them to, tap into their fullest potential. And so we want to underscore that the positive school climate means creating a welcoming, inclusive environment. It's critical to the success of our students and one of the top priorities of educators throughout the state. We need to reach out to parents. We know that parents are the key to their children's success, and we don't want parents to stay at home. We want parents to enroll their students in our preschools and our kindergarten classes and on, and be there, be welcome to our school campuses and be there for our students. This work is all directly connected to a priority of the local control funding formula some of you know about, where it is one of the most bold and historic steps ever taken to provide more equitable funding to support the needs of all students across the state of California. And priority 6 of that new funding formula is positive school climate. So we're bringing together all levels of education and community. And we can say in a positive way that terrific things are happening in California. Let me share one. Fresno Unified School District partnered with high school students to unveil a Dream Resource Center. The center will help families renew their applications for DACA before the October 5th deadline, and will also offer citizenship courses and free legal advice. We also need to reinforce the message to our 6.2 million students in 10,000 public schools that in California we celebrate diversity. Is that right? We celebrate diversity. We embrace diversity. We honor it, and we are strengthened from it. It makes us strong. It makes our economy powerful. Our students come from diverse backgrounds, over 100 languages spoken in our schools, diverse cultures, religions, countries. They're all welcome in California. Despite the discord and division and drama in Washington, D.C., California dreams big. California surges ahead. California schools keep getting better. California has long been working on education in a collaborative, cooperative way, which we call the California way, and it's being looked to across the nation as a leading pathway, a leading way to conduct business, bringing everybody together. And again, we encourage and we nurture our diversity. I've been lucky to be a teacher and coach for a long time, and I know that students must feel safe if they are going to learn and succeed in school. So after the presidential election, I strongly encourage school districts to make sure that students and parents feel safe at school by declaring themselves safe havens. And Irene told you already the success of that. Jessie Ryan is here, Jorge Aguilar is here. Jessie is a school board member who thought of the idea for Sac City Unified of saying we will protect our students' personal information. We should not be and will not be arms of ICE. We will stand strong to support our parents in making them feel welcome in our schools. To date, 116 school districts in California have adopted resolutions for safe havens. They're making their campuses safe havens. And that means nearly 3 million students and their families got the message loud and clear. Welcome to school. You're going to be safe here. We have 250,000 undocumented children who are enrolled in our California schools. They're part of our future, they're part of our strength. And another 750,000 students who are citizens in California, and they have one or more undocumented parents, and their lives are being upset as parents are deported. They must go with them in most cases. At school, it doesn't matter. You are all guaranteed a free and appropriate public education. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that loud and clear. Our schools, again, should not be arms of ICE. Together, we are stronger. Together, we lift our voices and our hearts to help all of our students to reach their fullest potential. And I thank all of you for being here today and for your commitment and your pathway in California to helping our schools and our kids succeed. And I'm very honored that we have with us our Attorney General is here. Running a little late. We could take some questions further, both from the floor as well as from the cards. But I wanted to share, I have hope. Tengo esperanza. You know, we have hope that we work because we care. Answering the first question, why are we here? Because we care. And we are here because we are optimists. Fundamentally, we believe we can change the world and make it better. And that's why we're here. Any of you want to make a comment or tap the great expertise? Any hard questions I'm giving to Irene?
I think we're going to go ahead and get started with the panel. We'll come back to you.
Okay, great. And I know we have a great panel. Ryan, thank you for being here. Viviana, thank you for being here. Karen Sakata, who's the superintendent of the district. Do you know I'm still a teacher on leave from the Mount Diablo Unified School District? I've been on leave for 30 years, but it's a long one. Thanks for keeping me around on your list, Karen. Back to you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Superintendent Torlakson. So we're just about to start our panel. We just want to remind you that as the panelists are speaking, if you have questions, take your index card, write your questions, and then hold them up, and one of our runners will pick them up. And we'll start the panel, but when the Attorney General comes in, we will stop and allow him to have his words.
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Torlakson, once again for your remarks. This has been a great effort, and we're really excited to be here today, but I think it's most important, we're excited to hear from the panelists and what they have to say so we can continue supporting our immigrant students. And so at this moment, it is my pleasure to introduce to you, all of you, Viviana Paez, who is today's moderator. So, Viviana Paez is a dynamic, vivacious news anchor and reporter for Univision 19, Sacramento. Ms. Paez earned a Master's of Arts in Broadcast Journalism at Miami University and has worked in the Spanish language news reporting profession in Florida and New Mexico. Ms. Paez was born in Barranquilla, Colombia. She moved to the United States in pursuit of her dreams to become a journalist. And the past couple of months since the election, she has been covering stories of immigrant communities, the families, and just been working around this issue. So we're happy to have you here today. Thank you, Viviana.
It's a pleasure to be part of this convention today. And I guess I'm talking in the wrong microphone. Okay, now this one is the one that is on. I want to mention, for me, this is really special, and this is why. I'm a journalist. I go out there, I interview the families that are suffering, are feeling this anxiety, this fear of having agents from ICE to come and just separate their families, or students that really want to go and work for the benefit of their families. They don't want to go to school. I was talking to a family that never sent their daughter and their son to school because they were afraid just to bring them over to school because they could be detained while taking them. Also, the families that I have spoke with, they already have a plan of emergency. They already know what to do when the agents are gonna actually knock on their doors. They have a plan of emergency. Okay, here are your passports. You stay here. We're gonna be deported. The neighbor already knows what to do. There's money in this bank. And when you hear these stories, it's like, oh my God, we are so lucky. We have to be so lucky of being here today that we don't have these issues. But as a journalist and all of here together, we're looking to find answers and to give them like the faith they need and to help them going through all this, because these are people who really want to make a difference in this world, a difference in their family, and they're really giving back to the community. I shouldn't be speaking too long, I know, but I'm a journalist, sorry. Let's start. So you already know who our panelists are, but I'm gonna tell you again. Mr. Smith, the Executive Director of Education Trust West, welcome. We have Feliza Ortiz-Licon, she's the Director, California Regional Director of UnidosUS. We have Fátima, which Fátima is gonna be the person who is gonna bring us that feelings towards this, this topic, because she's a student from the Academia Avance Charter School in LA. So she's the face of all the news stories that you have seen, not just in Univision, Noticias 19 Univision, but in other channels too. Jorge Aguilar, the Superintendent of Sacramento City Unified School District. We have Jessie Ryan, Board Trustee of the Sacramento City Unified School District. And we have the Superintendent Sakata from Contra Costa County Office of Education. Thank you for being part of this forum. So I'm gonna start with you, Fátima.
Anna? Just good. So the Attorney General has joined us here today.
Okay.
So Superintendent Torlakson, if you could join me really quick in welcoming Attorney General Javier Becerra to the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Viviana, for getting the panel started. And we're so honored today to have a champion for all the students of California, for all the parents of California, for all of California. And this individual has served so well our country. Came from Sacramento. He's a Sacramento native. 12 terms in Congress, bold leadership there, widely respected for his tenacious approach to fighting for all students and all citizens, and those who aren't citizens, fighting alike for a brighter future. This bold leadership has resulted in many lawsuits, and we've joined in some of them, my Department of Education, and we appreciate that he, as a top law enforcement official for the state of California, is a fighter for all of our citizens and all of our population, all of our families. Just can't thank you enough. The latest, he was in the front page of most papers yesterday, suing against the wall, saying there are a whole bunch of laws that will be violated if you just put up a wall. The president can't do that, and he's going to make sure in the justice system that that doesn't happen. And we appreciate you're also suing on the travel ban. So debemos construir puentes, no muros. We're about building bridges, not walls. And our Attorney General is a fighter, a champion, and a bridge builder. Javier Becerra, my friend.
So if I could just say to our superintendent of public schools, my apologies, because I know we try to teach our kids to follow the rules, and the rule was I was supposed to be here right at 9 o'clock. And so Superintendent Torlakson, my apologies to you, because you have a fantastic panel, and I have to ask for a little indulgence from each of the members of the panel, especially if you can agree with me to Fátima, who I understand is breaking the rules by being here, not in school. So, but there was something I learned from someone who has become a great friend of mine, and someone who I have admired, and now as a personal friend, I have understood what it means when you can admire someone who's still on earth. Congressman John Lewis, civil rights leader John Lewis, who was there as an 18-year-old when the civil rights struggles were going on, will always tell us, or used to tell me when I was in Congress as a colleague, when we had these big fights coming up ahead of us, the only way to make things happen is to get in the way, to get into trouble, get into good trouble. And so, Fátima, you're missing school, but you're getting in the way. You're getting into good trouble. And that's what we need to see of all Americans who believe in the future. Tom, I wanted to be here. I believe it's so important to let people know that California welcomes people who work hard. It wants to train every child that has an imagination that doesn't want to be contained. And that we understand that if we do this the right way, if we give Fátima's parents a chance to work hard, if we give Fátima a chance to just open up her mind, California will continue to be the leader in this country. And while we're the 6th economic power in the world already, just as one single state, the sky is the limit. And I say the sky is the limit as someone who was the son of immigrants. My father got to the 6th grade. I'm the first in my family to go to college and get a 4-year college degree. No one expected me to be the Attorney General, but here I am. The sky is the limit. And so I think we all have to fight to make sure the sky remains the limit for all of our youth. And I believe it's important for me to be here because there are a whole bunch of people that look a lot like Fátima, and actually a lot of the folks that are in this panel who probably can say that they have parents and grandparents who, like my dad, couldn't walk into restaurants because of the signs that said no dogs or Mexicans allowed. And so it is time to open up the world to everyone. And instead of pushing people out and separating people, we want to welcome them, give them incentive, el ánimo, to work really hard. And if we do that, Tom, man, for California, the sky will be the limit. And so we got to follow the rules. But every once in a while, we got to get in the way, and we got to get into good trouble. And so I hope we're all here, as Fátima is, to get into good trouble. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney General Javier Becerra, for joining us. And I think for those of you who are watching through the live webcast, for those students who are in their classrooms watching this video, this is just to reinforce the support that California brings to all of you. And we're here for you, and we're here for all the immigrant communities as well. So we'll resume to the panel now.
Sí se puede, en otras palabras, en español, sí se puede. Vamos a comenzar con Fátima. Well, sorry, I thought I was in the newscast. I'm like getting so excited. Okay, let's hear Fátima's story. Tell us, because you're the face of all the students that we're mentioning here, Fátima, you were there when they detained your dad. I can't imagine going through that. I want you to share your story with us.
Hi, I'm Fátima. Well, it was just a regular Tuesday morning, February 28th, where we're going to do the same routine as every day, where my dad takes me to school. When we dropped off my little sister at her campus, we were on our way to drop me off when we noticed cars were following us, and they pointed at us after another right turn we took, and they stopped us right before Avenue 33. And seeing them just approach the car and telling my dad to be quiet and to get off the car because he has an order of deportation, and seeing him being handcuffed, it was hard to see, and I couldn't keep my tears in. So, I mean, it was just hard because the whole routine stopped ever since that day.
And he was the one who worked for the family, right?
He was the one that brought the money to the house.
So what happened when he was detained? It was 6 months?
Yes.
So tell us what you felt during those 6 months, because I want to try, we're talking to school districts, to schools, to state personnel who can do something about you, about all the students that are out there, and we want to help you. So that's why I want them to understand what's going on, because if they are not in your shoes, they really don't feel it. So how was it?
It was hard. There wasn't a day where I could be at school just calm and not think about the situation. But I learned that no matter what situation you're in, you have to keep going. And my dad always taught me education is important. So even though I was going through that, I've always got good grades in school. And even after that happened, my family wanted me to stay home, but I went to school knowing that there was someone there to support me.
And Fátima is the face of California. This is the story that I repeatedly do like every single day because Univision, the Spanish channel, these are the people who watch us. These are the people that we can do a difference. And that's why it's so important for me to be a moderator from here, because I want to look for answers to help Fátima and many others. So now I'm going to ask you all, why is it important to talk about the immigration climate and about what is happening in our students, like Fátima? Who wants to answer first?
I just want to thank the department for putting this event together. I think it's a critical and very timely conversation. I think for me, one of the questions that we were asked is what brought us here today. And for me, like a lot of the work that I do is a personal connection and a personal commitment to alter and, as Attorney General said, Becerra said, to disrupt the process. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that I was born into this work. At the age of 5, my father was detained and deported. There had been a raid in his company, and he didn't show up. In the early 1980s, even though I was a US-born citizen, I also lived in the shadows with my family and feared deportation and separation. We had no outlets to speak about our personal situation. We were instructed very clearly by our family never to reveal or speak about the subject. And so I didn't realize that I had carried a trauma with me for so many years. When I spoke about the topic just 3 years ago, I had an emotional reaction that I had not anticipated. It was a raw pain that I had carried as a little girl into adulthood. And I think when I saw Fátima's story, unknowingly, she's part of our charter affiliate network for UnidosUS. A lot of what she was going through and a lot of what I saw really broke my heart, because I realized that, like Fátima, there's thousands of other students who are going through the same anxiety, the same fear and trauma. So I'm here today because I want to add my name to the list of advocates and supporters for our immigrant students and our immigrant families. And I also want to problematize the rhetoric that we're hearing about immigrant communities. I want to challenge that rhetoric, and I want to reshape the narrative by putting a human face to the immigrant story, because that is my story, and that is the story of many students and many families that are contributing to this great state and this great country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. How about you, Mr. Smith? Why are you taking part of this panel?
First of all, can we give a round of applause to Fátima?
Oh,
Being
yeah.
so courageous, sharing her story. You know, I applaud you. It's not easy to share your story so proudly and powerfully in front of folks, and to continue your studies in the way that you have. So continue to do the good work, all right? And we have your back, all right? So there's a couple things, a couple reasons I'm here. Number one, I'm a son of California. This is an important issue. And I'm actually really proud of the way that California has stood up, particularly for undocumented students and their families. But I want to call us higher as well. You can imagine those who are currently undocumented or documented, have mixed families, statuses, and are doing this work each day. Imagine now that you're a student in school, and imagine the intersections of your life, because unfortunately the narrative we often other undocumented families as if these aren't our neighbors, our business owners, ourselves. But imagine being low income. Imagine being LGBTQ and being bullied not only because of your sexual orientation, but because of your status. Imagine going to schools where you have resource officers who may be referring you to law enforcement, which may actually threaten your ability to live each day and work each day and actually go to school. This is all of our collective responsibility. And the narrative has to shift from this being a conversation about just immigrants and commodification to this being about how we, as a state, becomes the North Star when it comes to supporting these students. And also saying that what we're seeing from the Trump administration is unconscionable. It's immoral. It goes against the civil and human rights of everything that we believe in this state. And we need to do what's right. But I will say that California can be the leader. 1 out of 8 students has a parent who's undocumented in this state. Our research shows that 250,000 students in our system right now are undocumented. What we do in our schools and in our communities as school leaders here can change the narrative for the country. And I hope that we can talk about the practices necessary in order for that to get done. And one thing that I'm really excited about is that at Trust-West, the organization I lead, in partnership with AXA and CSBA and the California Parent Teacher Association, CASBO, and CALSA, the California Latino Superintendent Association, created a toolkit for educators, which is on our website, which has almost 70 resources, repository of information. Some of it is from Harvard, how school teachers and leaders can start to reframe the conversation around undocumented students. Some of it is from the amazing community partners in California who are at the front lines, who've been working with families and communities. So we have to begin to pull together the knowledge and make sure we're disseminating it broadly. And I'm excited to participate with that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Superintendent Aguilar, can you add why are you with us today?
Absolutely. Thank you and good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you to the department as well, Superintendent Torlakson, for organizing this event. Look, I think that what you're hearing is that this state and this nation will pay dearly for the consequences of this political rhetoric and far too many instances this reality for students. Board member Ortiz-Licon talked about it. Fátima, you can sense it in her voice. We will pay dearly for the social emotional consequences and effects that this situation is having on our youth today. Now, the difference between today and the past is that in the past, you know, back to Proposition 187 or 227, you heard about the anti-immigrant rhetoric, but you didn't feel it as much as you're feeling it today when it's part of campaigns, it's part of a political, your political affiliation, et cetera. And like Board Member Ortiz, you know, on a personal level, my father was detained and put through deportation proceedings. And I believe that had it not been for my decision to pursue a law degree, my family would have felt absolutely disempowered. And this was 2009. I mean, it's less than a decade ago that I was traveling with my father to Eloy, Arizona, where he was detained, managing his bond hearing process, changing venues to San Francisco, going to the San Francisco immigration court system, arguing on behalf of my own family. And the effects that this is going to have if we don't figure out a way in which we send a clear signal to our students and give them the competencies to persevere and overcome these anxieties and these emotions that one cannot imagine what it's like to go through, we will pay the consequences in the near future. And so it is not in our interest as a superintendent or leaders of our state's educational system, nonprofit sector, to disregard this because the consequences are going to be felt tremendously. And we need to be proactive on this front. We need to join each other and build the kinds of coalitions that aren't just sending signals, that are resulting in actual services being delivered to our students and to our families. As a superintendent, I can tell you that you cannot reasonably expect that a student will be able to focus on the academic challenges that we are putting in front of them as a great state of California and a leader in education when they are thinking about everything but academics.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Ryan, do you want to add something? You were telling me before we started our panel that you saw the fear in the students when they were in the playground.
Yes,
Can you tell us a little bit?
absolutely. So, you know, I have to also just commend Fátima for her courage and maturity in sharing her story, not just today, but continuously as a tool for inspiring other young people and adults to take action. So, you know, I am here today because the reality is that no child should have to fear in their lifetime their parent being ripped away from them. And no student should have to fear that they are somehow less valuable than other students as contributors to our society. I think it's very troubling that we continually tell young people that if they study hard, work hard, stay on track, they can achieve the California dream, the American dream. And now we're in the state where we are a divisive society where we're saying no, only some can actually reach for and achieve that American dream, and that's unacceptable. So I will tell you, almost immediately following the election, I began receiving calls from parents and students and educators at schools in our high poverty, extremely diverse district. And I was hearing stories that were tragic and disheartening, stories of third graders refusing to go out to recess because they thought that Immigration's Customs Enforcement would pick them up. Stories of fifth graders packing their bags and keeping them by their front doors in case they had to flee unexpectedly. Having children cry openly to me, an adult, and say that they were afraid to even go to the cafeteria because they didn't know that that was a safe space where they could ensure that eating would be an act that could be done peacefully. And when I heard that, educators immediately said, what can we do? Do we wait? Do we see if our federal administration takes action? And this was just post-election. And so we decided that we didn't have the luxury of time, that in fact silence was complacency and it was feeding this narrative of hate rhetoric. And so we decided to, in the span of a couple weeks, put together an ambitious resolution to become a safe haven school district to very clearly declare that we would not be arms of Immigration's Customs Enforcement and that our district would value each and every one of our students and provide a set of protections to that end. And that's just the beginning of the work we're doing, because the reality is that our students and families continue to be re-traumatized by the federal actions that have occurred over the course of the last month. And we have to step up and continue to step up to say that we are doing everything in our power to be that beacon of light for families and students who are being told that they might not have a place that is valued in our country today.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Superintendent Sakata.
So I come here. So the reason I'm here is because of three different hats or three different aspects of myself. One is being the county superintendent of schools. The second is being a Japanese American whose parents were interned. And then the third coming as being previously a principal. Right after the election, we as a county started hearing all kinds, the nation started hearing a lot of anti-immigration and anti-everything kind of rhetoric. And so our schools were very worried about how to keep kids safe and how to give them a way to be civically involved. We knew that protests were happening before the inauguration. And so our county office created a task force that include a variety of different kinds of individuals, psychologists, administrators, community members, parents, communication specialists, to come together to create a toolkit for our county office. So on our county office website, there is a toolkit entitled All Kids Are Our Kids. My chief communications officer, Terry Keeney, is in the audience, and he was he was the chairperson for this task force. And within a 6-week period, we created that task force. I invite all of you to go to the Contra Costa County Office of Education website. The toolkit is meant for everybody and has been used throughout the state. We reference resources from AXA and from CSBA and from a variety of places we talk about. And we have been updating that toolkit to include resources around DACA, around immigration resources, about how to deal with student protests, how to send information out to families in the community, and teacher resources as well. So that was one of the my reasons for being a part of it, coming here today. The second, and listening to Fátima's story, it brings back for me some of my own personal activism. I'm a third-generation Japanese American, and my parents and my grandparents were all interned. And although my parents didn't talk about the internment, they refused to talk about it. I have learned about it in high school when I was a student at Cal Berkeley, and I continue to learn about it each and every day. And I think it's important to understand what's happened in terms of immigrants in the past. I never thought that history would repeat itself, but there's been many anti-immigration, much rhetoric that mirrors what happened to the Japanese Americans. And as a community, the JACL, Japanese American Citizens League, has come out strongly opposing any anti-Muslim, immigration kinds of issues, and so we're supportive. So that's a second hat that I come with. And finally, the third way I come to you is being a former principal. I always, when I ran my school, my belief, and I think the belief that I instilled upon my staff, is that every student that walked in the door of my school was ours. And we would treat each and every student regardless of socioeconomics, regardless of race, religion, regardless of any of those factors. They were all our students, and we were all going to give them the promise of a strong education. So that's the reason I'm here.
Thank you. Now that we know what's going on in the life of our students, the fear, the anxiety, I want to ask you, what are the skills or the resources that the school district must give to schools to protect our students or to make them feel secure? Superintendent Aguilar, I will go with you first.
Thank you very much. The first thing I think that Member Ryan, who is on our school board, and I'm very fortunate and honored to serve as superintendent, is certainly being very proactive in stating your position as an entire school district, not just the superintendent, not just individual board members, but the entire school board of education, as well as the superintendent. We've been very clear that our schools will be a welcoming place for all individuals. We've been clear that our school employees who are documented are going to be protected as well. In fact, we have begun the process of working with other partners to identify DACA employees and in the area of teaching, pursuing the argument that a teacher who is documented should receive immigration sponsorship, just as engineers do, just as graduate students who become professors and universities sponsor them to remain in the workforce here. Sac City, I've been authorized by our school board to pursue an initiative that would perhaps result in DACA teachers being sponsored fully for immigration purposes, on the argument that we have a shortage in California of teachers. And as such, we believe that we can prove to the Department of Labor and others that based on that shortage, DACA teachers who have already been vetted by our federal government ought to have the opportunity, and that employers such as Sac City ought to have the opportunity to sponsor those individuals. That's, for example, one of the initiatives that we are pursuing. We likely will get in trouble for it. We will likely get sued for it. But Sac City will be very firm in its commitment to students, families, and in this case to our DACA teachers, that we will move very aggressively and challenge any process so that based on the teacher shortage, we can move toward sponsoring those individuals.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have any idea, like any suggestion?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things that I want to build on from both Jorge and Jessie's really profound examples. One thing, we talk about supporting undocumented students and their families as if this is not going to take a big culture shift, as if just knowing that fear exists is enough. But let's be truthful. We all have unconscious implicit biases toward each other, including towards immigrant families. So how are we as staff members, as leaders, owning our biases? How are we understanding that culture does eat change for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and setting a model for how we are going to think differently? And that's going to take a couple things. One, we can no longer be siloed. We didn't talk about the status of students because we wanted to treat students equally. But that's no longer the case. We know now there is a threat to the students that we hold dear. So how are we working with immigrant rights organizations within our communities? How are we working with districts like West Contra who are starting to think about that culture shift? How are we talking about the things that we don't talk about with staff, we know exist, and we know that those crucial conversations are challenging, but they must happen because the landscape demands that we do it for our children, and that's really important. The second thing, having worked in parent engagement LAUSD schools for 6-7 years, building welcoming environments for families is hard enough. Doing it when you have families who are concerned about coming to school and possibly being stopped and detained, it's truthfully a challenge. And we know that the partnership between parents and schools is essential for children to feel safe. So how are we thinking differently about reaching our parents? Are we waiting for them to come to us, or are we finally going to them? Are we finally knocking on doors? Are we finally doing the type of communication possible that says, we welcome our communities? Not only that, we know there's a crisis. We need to work together on that. Last but not least, this is an issue that I think is important across communities. Sometimes I think the conversation and context is just, this is a Latino issue. And that makes it someone else's problem. This is our collective responsibility. And it's not just a Latino issue. Obviously, it impacts API families. It impacts families who've immigrated from all over the country. So how are we reframing that conversation? So we need to be smarter. We need to not work in silos. We need to know the information. And then the last thing I'll say is we need to listen to our students. Fátima has an amazing story that other students have as well. Are we creating the spaces necessary for our students to tell their stories?
And that was going to be my next question. I wanted to ask Fátima, in your perspective as a student, what could your teachers, your school district, your school could do better to make you feel secure that you want to go there? What can they do for you?
Well, my school, when I decided to go back, the first teacher I talked to was my house leader, and I talked to her while we were on the bus to go to the Museum of Tolerance, and I showed her. She was the first person to see the video. So then she started communicating with the executive director, Mr. Mireles, and since then the school helped us by they helped us call important people like lawyers and elected officials. And at school they also gave me service by the counselor. I talked to counselors just to make me feel better and to see how I was doing at school and stuff. So
So you felt the support from your school at that time?
Yes.
What's the name of the teacher?
Ms. Ramirez.
We need more teachers like her, because I have heard a lot of stories about students that they're like, oh, they don't pay attention to you. They think it's just a Latino issue. So, go to the Latinos, go, to the, well, I'm not going to say it because I think it's incorrect how they say it. But just go to that he seems to look Latino, he will just do that. So we need more teachers like that. And I want to ask Ms. Ortiz, you are an activist, you already shared your story. As you could see, it's not only the students are going through all this, you went through this. What can be done in your perspective, now that you have that experience and now that you are an activist of students and about our community that is going through all this immigration climate that we're living right now? What can we do better?
I think a couple of things, but one is understanding the immigrant community better. There are, as Ryan mentioned, it's not a Latino issue alone. We have refugees, we have immigrants that come because of high skill sponsorship, we have unaccompanied youth. When I said the story about my father's deportation, I didn't mention that my father was a third-generation immigrant, meaning that his father, his and his grandfather had been in this country working since the turn of the century. So by the time my father was deported, his family had roots in this country for about 80 years. Let that sink in. 80 years, still undocumented. There was no borders when my great-grandfather started coming to the US to work. My grandfather retired from the United States. We have long histories in this country. And I think it's important that people understand when we speak about immigrant communities, we're not speaking about communities that just emerged last year or families that came a year ago. Because of the nature of the work that UnidosUS does across the country, and immigration has been one of our main areas of focus for policy, and comprehensive immigration has been one of our main areas of focus, we get a lot of comments, unsolicited comments from the audience and from a broad spectrum of folks. And the one thing that they constantly say is, these kids, DACAs, have been here for so long, why haven't they legalized their status? Well, newsflash, many of our communities, many of our families have attempted and have been part of the process for 20 plus years, 15 plus years. It is not an easy thing to legalize your status. There is a lot of misconceptions as to who the immigrant families are, as to who the DACA students are. And we have an entire sector, African students who are also DACA recipients that are not being acknowledged in this conversation. The highest rate of immigration right now, it's coming from Asian countries, not from Mexico, not from Central America. And so the average family has been here for 20 years. So just understanding the diversity, understanding that we don't use the term illegal, understanding that when students are chanting, build that wall, it's not a political, teachers felt that they didn't want to interfere because it was political. No, it is bullying, and it is happening in your school site. And so it is your responsibility to protect your students so that they feel welcome at their school site. So I think that it's important for us to have teacher training around the diversity of the immigrant community, understanding that when students are making references to some of the rhetoric that is coming from the White House and from the administration, that is not an issue of being politically correct or not, or having a Democrat-Republican conversation. It is a human conversation that needs to take place, and it's impacting students in real ways.
Ms. Ryan?
So I think so many of the panelists said some really astute things that we should be taking to heart, but a few things that I want to add. You know, as Mr. Smith said, this idea that we need to really embrace courageous conversations at every level. And let me tell you what that looks like to me. You know, we often hear that our children are listening and taking in each and every word that the adults around them are saying. And also on the playgrounds are, you know, hearing things and processing it in different ways day in, day out. This for me really hit home when my 6-year-old daughter at the time came to me in tears and asked about our president. And she said that she didn't like our president because he didn't like people like her. And when I asked her what she meant by that, she said, you know, women, Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans, these were all the things that she identified as a Puerto Rican, Jamaican girl, and she felt that our president did not value those things. And when I asked her where she was hearing those things, she started to share with me that in a span of weeks after the election on the playground, she had been called a monkey. She had been called some pretty horrific things that made her question her value as a child, as a human being. And we heard stories like that all over our district. But beyond that, when we talk about engaging in courageous conversations, yes, we must be talking with our children because they will take our lead and they will also hear from us when we say that this is unacceptable and that you cannot repeat these horrible words because it will just perpetuate this hate and inequity. But we also have to challenge our principals, our teachers, people who are at every level of our school system to engage in conversations around their implicit bias. I must share that we've shed tears on my own school board with individuals that considered themselves progressive, but had a really hard time acknowledging that we had to take swift and bold action around protecting our dreamers and our undocumented students. Which leads me to the next thing. You know, when we talk about recognizing that this is more than just one population, many individuals think that as we fight this resistance, we're fighting a resistance on behalf of Mexican immigrants. And we know that that is so limited in really what we need to tackle to, you know, change this troubling reality that we live in today. We are speaking for immigrants of all ethnicities, but we also need to recognize that we're speaking for marginalized populations. Our LGBTQ community, our Black community is also being affected in very difficult and troubling ways by the hate speech that is permeating our playgrounds, our state, and our nation. And unless we include them in our plans for safe haven type efforts, they are going to be further marginalized, further disenfranchised, and not feel like they have an avenue to unite against these atrocities. And then finally, I would just say, I think that we need to continue to be bold and proactive about creating concrete partnerships and solutions. I see that our mayor just walked in, Mayor Darrell Steinberg. I'm very proud to say that yes, we were the first in the state to become a safe haven school district, but immediately began working in partnership with our city and our sanctuary status and our county so that we could deliver a continuum of supports for students and families that needed it the most. And that needs to be part of plans that we're engaging in every region of the state.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Superintendent Sakata.
You know, in many ways, in our minds, there's already been a wall that has been built, and we need to chip away at that wall. A lot of our work started because there was a lot of hate speech against all groups. We had incidents against African Americans, against Asians, anti-Semitic incidents in our schools. And you know, schools are just a reflection of society in general. So the hate speech has come from a lot of the rhetoric that we hear from our president. And so I think we have to speak up. I think we also need to learn more about one another. We have started an equity initiative in Contra Costa County, Allies and Advocates, and we are doing training, I know, in our region, and I know many of our districts who've had hate incidents in their schools have been working with all their staffs. San Ramon has been working with teaching tolerance with all their staff, their custodial staff, their office staff, as well as their teaching staff. And I think that's really important, because I really agree with Mr. Smith that there's a lot of, we as human beings have implicit bias. We all do. And so we need to examine that, and we need to learn more about one another in terms of our cultures, in terms of our immigration status. The Asian population is very varied from a number of different countries, and each of those populations is different. And they're different based on when they came to this country. But basically this country has been based on immigration. We are a country of immigrants. And I think we should acknowledge that, and we need to speak up in regards to these issues.
Thank you, Superintendent. In other words, lead by example. Everything starts at home, and that is my next question. One last comment from each one of you. For parents who are watching us, if you can give the message in Spanish, that would be great. For families who don't have the education, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to get the resources to feel secure, to feel less anxious. What should I tell my daughter or my son? The students are going. They need those palabras de aliento, like we say it in Spanish, like those words of wisdom to keep us calm. I want each of you to send a last message to everybody who's watching us in the live stream, everyone who's going to be watching us at 6 p.m. in Univision Channel 19. I want to give them hope. We already know what the school districts, what the schools, what the state could do to benefit all our students like Fátima. Just let's think about the parents, because sometimes we don't know what to do, and everything starts at home. That anxiety, that fear, and then it's transmitted to our daughters and to our sons. Mr. Smith, you go first.
Okay. Well, I'll say this to the parents in California. So, para los padres en California, tú son poderosos y son los abogados para tus estudiantes. I think it's.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm Hispanic.
I will say that parents are powerful. And at this time, you are the advocates. You are the lawyers for your students. We need you more than ever. And we ask you not to retreat, but to work with our communities. My favorite quote is from Bayard Rustin, who's the architect of the March on Washington. And he said, every community needs a group of angelic troublemakers. I am calling California to be that group. And I'm an advocate, so I have to call us out a little bit. I would love to say that hate speech began when Donald Trump was elected in this state, but that's not the truth. We know California has a xenophobic history that dates back even before Proposition 187, even before Proposition 227. We need to do better. And this is the time to do so. So if you were ever called to be a better educator, a better advocate, a parent who says, I'm going to do everything I can do, a student who's going to say, I'm going to be courageous enough to be like Fátima, community leaders who say, this is not someone else's issue, this is our issue. Now is the time. There needs to be a sense of urgency. We can't rest on our laurels, and we need to do the good work now.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Ortiz.
There is a Mayan poem, and it's in Lakesh, I am the other you. Para los padres que nos están viendo y las familias inmigrantes, yo soy el reflejo de ustedes y de su esfuerzo. I want to remind our state, our community, any stakeholder who's interested in this topic about the original dreamers. There's a lot of conversations about Dreamers and DACA, and I think that to an extent, Dreamers and DACA, people want to see them as the American example. They are vetted already, they've gone to school, they're doing great and contributing, and that's amazing. But a lot of our Dreamers and DACA would not be possible without the deferred dreams of their parents. Many of us would not be here if our parents had not deferred their own dreams. So I want us to keep focus on the original dreamers, those that sacrifice and do not get the glory or the spotlight, that do not have the focus and the advocacy from many communities because they're not seen as the good Americans. They are building our country, they are supporting our students, they are building the next generation of Americans. And without them, we cannot imagine having a student who would want to stay in this country without their parent. And so let's think of the original dreamers. They have stories, they have contributed, and they also deserve dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. And Fátima, I want you to give a message to the students that are just like you, los hijos que nos están viendo y que están sintiendo temor. So other students like you, what can you tell them?
So other students like me, I'll tell them not to be scared to speak up, to keep going every day to school, and to not put everything down, to continue to speak up and to not be afraid, because if they don't speak up, there's nothing that people can do for them.
Thank you, Fátima. Superintendent Aguilar.
You know, I often say that I serve as superintendent, and I do so with a great deal of modesty and humility, but with great clarity that as a public servant, I owe it to our community to protect the constitutional rights that our students and our families have to a free public education, to protect their First Amendment rights, just as Fátima just mentioned. And we will stand firm on this issue because it's personal, because professionally it reflects who I am at my deepest core. Para los padres, sepan clara y sencillamente, llanamente que en Sacramento tenemos la dicha, y en el Estado tenemos la dicha de tener a muchos líderes en el ramo educacional, que estamos aquí para proteger los derechos constitucionales que todos sus hijos tienen, a que sean proveídos una educación gratuita en las escuelas públicas, y es el deber que yo tengo como superintendente y el derecho que tienen ustedes como padres de sus hijos que asisten a nuestras escuelas públicas.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Ryan.
I would say, as evident by the incredible people on this panel and in this room, that there is an outstanding community of support that is standing with our hands at your back. What I would want to say as a message to my children, to all of the children across California and the country, is that you have to have courage, you have to continue to take heart, to recognize that in these very difficult and uncertain times, your character is actually being determined. You are going to become more compassionate, you are going to become better advocates, you are going to become California's future leaders as a result of the experiences that you have not only endured, but used to really fuel your passion for change. And ultimately, I would say that irrespective of the difficulties before us, you need to know that our love is much greater than the hate that is being espoused across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Superintendent.
My message would be the same message that Fred Korematsu gave when he was the lone person who refused to be interned. And he had said, don't be afraid to stand up. And I actually say that to everyone. Don't be afraid to stand up for those next to you. I believe that education is the one thing that can change students' lives, and I think those of us who are educators will do everything in our power to make sure that students are safe when they come to our schools. But I say to parents and to students, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to find your own allies and advocates.
Thank you very much. Time's up, I believe. Time's up. Yes, they're telling me. I have so many questions for you. And you know well, they're going to tell. Well, a question that I want to ask them, what can the media do better for our community? This is a personal question. It was in the agenda. Is there something that we could do better in your view?
I will say this. First of all, I commend, I think there are great journalists who've been following the story. I will say we need to take back the narrative. So there's a narrative about the deserving immigrant versus the undeserving immigrant. And and you see it in every news story. I think all people who are in our state are deserving, and we need to make sure that we are talking about them because of their humanity, not just because of the sexiness of a story.
Somebody else? I think everybody agreed in the audience with your answer. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for sharing your stories.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me give you my card.
Well, do we have more comments? Are we good?
No? Should we ask? No, yeah, just one question. I didn't want to get in trouble. Then they're not going to invite me again.
Let's just give our panelists one more beautiful round of applause for that amazing discussion. I'm just so moved and touched by everything that you said, and I had to wipe my tears away, and I just want to say thank you all for being here. We do have our wonderful mayor here, and I'm just going to have Superintendent Torlakson introduce him now.
Inspired? Incredible panel, amazing stories, amazing action, amazing commitment. And just proud to be with us. Debemos trabajar más unidos, juntos. Somos un equipo fuerte when we work together. And so someone who is a leader who brings people together, a dear friend of mine, I served in the legislature with Darrell Steinberg. He's a champion everywhere he goes for all, for the rights of all, justice for all, and a better life, and lots of hope. So my good friend Darrell Steinberg, mayor of this grand city, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Superintendent Torlakson, my friend Tom, for your dedication and for organizing this very, very important event. We cannot gather like this enough to reiterate our solidarity, our commitment to one another, and our commitment to the best of American values, which aren't being represented very well in Washington, D.C. right now. I want to thank the panel. I only got to hear some of it, but I'm especially proud of my Sacramento City Unified School District and Jessie Ryan and our new superintendent, Jorge Aguilar, for being the first in the state to establish a safe haven district. It's the best of Sacramento values. You know, I have been like Superintendent Torlakson, even though we're both very young men. We've been in politics a long time. And along the way, I've learned, and I believe that on most issues, people of goodwill may have different points of view, and that the goal is always to maintain your values, but to find middle ground and compromise. That's the nature of politics and government. Whether you're talking about budgets, whether you're talking about negotiations, whether you're talking about business and labor, the environment, and all the myriad of challenges and issues and stakeholders that are involved in our democracy. And yet, what I'm so proud of California around and about, and why I'm so proud to be here today, is that there is a corollary to that idea that good politics and governance must always be the product of compromise. And that is the following: we never compromise the civil rights of people, period, end of story. There is no amount of money, there is no threat about potentially losing money that makes it worth sacrificing the civil rights of people. And as long as we are clear on that point, we actually send a very powerful message to those who want to turn back progress. For bullies, sense and smell weakness. And when you indicate a willingness to compromise on people's civil rights, that doesn't make the bully want to compromise, it actually makes them want to push farther. And so we are absolutely correct to hold our ground and to state loud and clear that we will resist at every turn the federal effort to compromise the civil rights of not just dreamers, but of all immigrants, of all people who are working hard, trying to make their way and contribute to the state and the country we love. And I say that not just as a politician and as a mayor, but we're here at the State Department of Education. And it bears reminding ourselves, just as Superintendent Sakata did and the other panelists did, that we must be students of history. I think a lot about World War II, and of course it's not the only chapter. But where were these forums? Where was the leadership when Japanese Americans were being interned? We know the stories of the Holocaust and what the Jewish people and others suffered, my ancestors, during World War II. And there are mostly stories of good people, I say that in quotes, who turned their backs, who may not have perpetrated the evil, but did nothing about it. Elie Wiesel said that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. But there were many examples of righteous Gentiles and righteous people who risked their lives to do the right thing and saved thousands and tens of thousands of people in the process. And so I'm proud of California. And I say we pull out all stops. I'm proud that we're going to be a sanctuary state and that we have a sanctuary city. And Safe Haven, I don't think we've begun to dive into what Safe Haven may mean. Now, hopefully, this DACA issue will be resolved in the right way over the next 6 months. I don't think we can count on that. And what are we willing to do in our cities, in our school districts, in our communities to make sure that our immigrants are protected? Are we willing to open our homes? Are we willing to take the same steps that righteous people did in Europe in World War II to ensure that if the immigration police do come after those who are law-abiding and who are living a good life, just trying to live a good life, that we'll do everything possible to make sure that they are protected? You better believe we will, because we have the benefit of understanding and knowing that history. It happened in, if not in our lifetimes, in our parents' lifetimes. This is the worst of times in some respects, but it's also the best of times. Because the resistance in many forms is enhancing our civic commitment, our engagement, and in some respects, our democracy in ways that have never been seen before. For this too will pass. The question is, will it pass with us being stronger, being more organized, being more willing to never allow people to be treated in ways that are abhorrent to civil society? I tend to see the glasses more than half full. And I know that progress often is measured in increments. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a young woman who is working back in Washington, D.C. for a progressive think tank. And she said to me that she's not sure whether or not she really is enjoying it because it feels like she can't participate in getting anything positive done in Washington, D.C. So I relayed to her a little bit about my story of being pro tem of the Senate during the worst recession in modern history, and was reminded of what one of Tom Torlakson's and my colleagues, the late, great John Vasconcellos, said to me at the time. He said, you know, it's more fun to serve during good times, but it's much more important to serve during the bad times. Because there's a lot at stake now. To defeat those who are trying to roll back history is every bit as important as better times when we can make those advances. So don't lose heart. Let's recognize that we have tremendous strength in this state and in this country, and that this too shall pass, but it will pass with us protecting millions of people, with us standing up for the best of American values, and with this chapter of history being told in a very different way than the history that has to be told about what was not done during the 1930s and the 1940s. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for having me.
Wow, thank you so much for those amazing words. Let's give him another round of applause. Let's give our panelists and everybody who was with us today another round of applause. So with that, we just have one final question for you with regards to today's discussion on Poll Everywhere. I'll ask them to switch to that momentarily. But here's the question for you. Reflecting on today's discussion, what action steps will you take next? Reflecting on today's discussion, what action steps will you take next?
And we also ask in the meantime that you can share your reflections with us via social media. Like we said, Twitter is at CADEPTED, and just continue to share your reflections. The panelists will be in the lobby if you would like to continue this conversation. We also encourage you to attend the sessions which are in your program. Most of them will be led by our panelists, and so we encourage these conversations to continue. It doesn't end in this room.
That's right. We do have one last minute update to our program, and that was that the Sacramento City Unified School District panel in room 2408 will no longer be taking place, but we invite you to join in all of the other sessions. And so with that, as a reminder, we do have a session taking place in this room right after this panel, so we're going to ask everyone at this time to adjourn to the lobby. Please type the word leave as you go for your poll everywhere, otherwise you'll be connected.
And you continue to see reflections up on the screens.
As you go.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you all for coming.